Joni Lamb's world is crashing down as shocking secrets are revealed. After years of loyal service to Daystar, the network has now erased her from its broadcasts, and the reason is more explosive than anyone expected. The betrayal by none other than Joyce Meyer has left everyone stunned. What happened behind closed doors? Why did Joyce Meyer turn on Joni? And what does this mean for the future of Daystar? Tune in to uncover the shocking truth behind Joni Lamb's dramatic fall from grace. The news of Joni Lamb's firing from Daystar sent shockwaves through the Christian media community. It was something no one saw coming. Joni had been the face of Daystar for years, the driving force behind its growth and success. Her sudden departure left people stunned, questioning how it all went so wrong. How could someone who had co-founded the network and dedicated her life to its mission find herself on the outside, looking in? The timing of Joni's firing couldn't have been more dramatic. It came right after her whirlwind remarriage to Dr. Dougweiss, a family friend and Christian marriage counselor. The marriage raised eyebrows, especially considering the emotional weight of losing her husband, Marcuslamb, just months earlier. The Christian community had been divided over how quickly Joni moved on. Some saw it as a sign of strength and resilience, while others questioned her motives and emotional readiness. The public eye was already focused on Joni's personal life, but this was something much bigger. The announcement of her firing came as a complete shock, especially when it was revealed that it was Joyce Meyer, a longtime close friend and respected leader in the Christian community, who had exposed the situation behind closed doors. It wasn't just a disagreement or a personal fallout, it was something much more serious. People were left wondering what had happened behind the scenes that led to this dramatic turn of events. Joni had spent decades building Daystar alongside Marcus, and now, in the blink of an eye, she was out. The question on everyone's mind was why? How did it all fall apart so quickly? What had happened within the network that caused such a rift, leading to her sudden removal? The details were still unfolding, but the implications were clear. This was more than just a personal issue between two people. It was a reflection of deeper problems within Daystar itself. For years, the network had been seen as a beacon of Christian broadcasting, a place of hope and faith for millions. But now, with Joni's firing, the cracks were starting to show. The foundation of the ministry, which had once seemed unshakable, was now crumbling. Fans and followers of Daystar were left with more questions than answers. Was this just a personal fallout, or was there something more going on behind the scenes that no one knew about? As the story unfolded, it became clear that Joni's firing was only the beginning of a much larger crisis for Daystar. The network's leadership, once a family-centered operation, was now at a crossroads. The shocking removal of Joni Lamb had left the future of Daystar uncertain. Fans, insiders, and even those close to the network were left questioning what this meant for the organization's future. Would Daystar be able to recover from this loss? Or was it the beginning of the end for the network that had once been the cornerstone of Christian television? Joni Lamb's decision to remarry just months after the death of her husband, Marcus Lamb, shocked many within the Christian media world. The speed at which this relationship progressed raised serious questions and stirred up a wave of whispers and criticism. Marcus had been a central figure in both Joni's personal life and their joint ministry, Daystar Television Network. His sudden passing was not just the end of a marriage, but also a major turning point for the network. In 2015, Joni Lamb got the title of counselor for the network, a Sir Pullman named for Joni, who had always been seen as the heart and soul of Daystar alongside Marcus, was now in the spotlight, forced to navigate not just the loss of her husband, but the future of the network they had built together. When Joni started publicly talking about moving forward with her life, many people were understanding. Grief is a complicated thing, and it's hard to judge how long it should take for someone to heal. But the timing of her remarriage to Dougweiss, a family friend and marriage counselor, left many feeling uncomfortable. The relationship seemed to progress at an almost alarming speed, with Joni making clear her intentions to marry Doug not long after Marcus's death. The couple's decision to get married, not just quickly but seemingly without much time to properly grieve, became a focal point for discussion. Many people in the Christian community found themselves questioning Joni's emotional readiness. Grief is often a long and painful process, and for someone who had been married to Marcus for decades, it seemed as though the emotional weight of that loss hadn't been fully processed before she jumped into a new relationship. People wondered whether Joni was truly ready for such a big step, or if she was simply trying to fill the void left by Marcus. The new relationship, which had the added complexity of Doug being a family friend, seemed to blur the lines between personal and professional life. Doug wasn't just someone Joni had met after Marcus's death. He was someone who had been close to the family, and now he was stepping into a role that many thought was inappropriate given the circumstances. For many, it was the speed of the relationship that caused the most concern. Joni, who had always been seen as a pillar of strength and faith, seemed to be moving too quickly, especially considering the emotional toll of losing her husband. The Christian community, where Joni had long been a respected figure, began to question her motives. Was this really about moving on, or was it about avoiding the painful process of grief? For some, it appeared that Joni was trying to rush past the loss rather than face it head-on. There's a certain expectation in faith-based communities that people, especially leaders, will mourn appropriately and with a sense of grace. Joni's rapid remarriage, especially when viewed against the backdrop of her husband's sudden passing, seemed out of step with these expectations. The speed with which Joni and Doug's relationship progressed left some people wondering if the new union was a distraction. Instead of focusing on the grief and the emotional healing that so many thought would be part of Joni's journey, she seemed to be focused on a new chapter in her life. This raised even more questions. Was Joni running from her grief? Was she seeking solace in the arms of someone who, while emotionally supportive, was not necessarily the right person to help her heal? As Joni and Doug's relationship grew stronger, the Christian community began to scrutinize not just the speed of their romance, but also the implications for Daystar. Joni had always been deeply involved in the network, and now, with her personal life moving so quickly, people began to wonder if it was affecting her ability to lead. Was she able to focus on the future of Daystar, or was her attention now divided? The timing of her remarriage, coupled with the changing dynamics at Daystar, fueled speculation about the stability of the network's leadership. Many viewers and insiders started to feel that Joni was more concerned with her personal life than with Daystar's mission. The ministry, which had once been a family-centered organization, was now facing a shift. Some employees and close associates of Joni began to feel that her focus was now on her own life and her new relationship, rather than on the network she had worked so hard to build with Marcus. This shift created a divide within the leadership of Daystar. What had once been a collaborative environment, where input from multiple voices was valued, now seemed to be dominated by Joni's personal vision. Inside Daystar, questions about Joni's leadership style began to surface. Longtime staff members and family friends started to notice that decisions, once made as a group, were now being handled by Joni alone. Some felt that the balance of power had shifted in a way that made them feel sidelined. The relationship between Joni and Doug seemed to further cement this shift, with Doug now a prominent figure in Joni's life. Some wondered if he was becoming too involved in the operations of Daystar. Doug's influence within the network seemed to grow quickly, and his role in the leadership of Daystar, though not officially defined, became a topic of discussion. For some, this new dynamic felt like an uncomfortable extension of Joni's control over the network, and it didn't sit well with everyone. Despite the backlash, Joni and Doug defended their relationship, insisting that they were doing what was best for their personal happiness and their shared faith. But to many, it felt like they were pushing ahead with their personal lives without fully considering the impact it had on the people around them. Joni, who had once been seen as a symbol of faith and dedication, was now being seen by some as someone who was rushing through life, avoiding the natural process of grief, and losing sight of her role as a leader within Daystar. The quick progression of Joni and Doug's relationship raised even more questions as the months passed. Was Joni trying to escape the pain of losing Marcus? Or was she genuinely in love with Doug? The answer wasn't immediately clear, and the more Joni and Doug pushed forward with their plans, the more people began to feel uncomfortable with the situation. The question of whether Joni was making the right decision, both personally and professionally, lingered. The rapid pace of her remarriage left people feeling uneasy, unsure if this new chapter in Joni's life was a sign of strength or a sign of deeper emotional instability. Ultimately, Joni's quick remarriage marked the beginning of a turning point in her personal life and in the leadership of Daystar. The speed of the relationship, combined with the scrutiny it received from the public and within Daystar, raised questions that went far beyond her personal life. It became clear that this was no longer just about Joni's grief and healing. It was about the future of Daystar, its leadership, and its ability to stay true to its mission. Joni's rapid move toward marriage became a symbol of a larger shift, one that would eventually lead to a deeper crisis within Daystar, impacting not just her personal relationships, but also the future of the network she had helped build. Inside Daystar, the tension was palpable. For years, the network had been a symbol of unity, built on faith, family, and a shared mission to spread the message of the gospel. Joni Lamb and her late husband Marcus had co-founded the network, and their vision had turned it into one of the largest Christian broadcasting outlets in the world. The success of Daystar had been a testament to their hard work, their faith, and their ability to work together as a family. But after Marcus' sudden death, something began to change. The tight-knit atmosphere of Daystar started to unravel, and the cracks that had long been hidden began to show. At the heart of the growing tension was Joni herself. Before Marcus's death, Joni had always been seen as a collaborative leader. She and Marcus had worked hand in hand, making decisions together and ensuring that Daystar remained a ministry that valued input from everyone involved. But as time went on, Joni's leadership style began to shift. No longer was it about collaboration. It became more about control. Joni started making decisions on her own, without consulting the team or even her own family. The network that had once felt like a family operation now started to feel like a business. Those who had worked alongside Marcus and Joni from the beginning began to feel sidelined. The sense of unity that had once defined Daystar was now replaced by division. This shift in leadership was subtle at first. Small decisions that once required the input of the leadership team were now being made by Joni alone. Staff members began to notice that the collaborative spirit of the ministry was fading, replaced by a more authoritarian approach. While some respected Joni's drive and determination, others began to feel uncomfortable with the way she was running things. The once open atmosphere where everyone had a voice now seemed to be dominated by Joni's personal vision, and those who disagreed with her were starting to feel marginalized. The situation only grew more complicated with Joni's remarriage to Dr. Dougweiss. Doug, a family friend and marriage counselor, quickly became an influential figure in Daystar, despite not having an official role within the organization. His rapid rise within the network raised eyebrows among the staff, some of whom began to question whether Joni was consolidating power not only within her own hands, but also by bringing in allies who would support her vision for Daystar's future. Doug's involvement seemed to reflect the larger shift that was taking place within the network. The once collaborative leadership was now being replaced by a smaller, more insular group of people loyal to Joni. For those who had been with Daystar since its early days, the changes were difficult to accept. Longtime staff members who had helped build the network from the ground up began to feel like outsiders in their own organization. Decisions that had once been made with careful thought and input from multiple people were now being made quickly and without consultation. The tight-knit community that had once characterized Daystar now felt fractured, with many feeling like they were being pushed aside. The tensions weren't just professional, they were deeply personal. Joni's son, Jonathan Lamb, who had been groomed to take on a larger role within the network, found himself at odds with his mother. For years, Jonathan had worked alongside Marcus and Joni, learning the ropes of leadership and preparing to eventually take over Daystar. But as Joni's control over the network grew, Jonathan began to feel like his input was no longer valued. He felt increasingly alienated from the organization he had been a part of for so long. The frustration between mother and son grew, and it became clear that their relationship was being tested in ways it never had been before. Jonathan's growing discontent was not just about the professional decisions being made. It was personal. He had spent years working alongside his father, learning from him, and feeling a deep sense of responsibility to continue his legacy. But as Joni's influence grew, it became evident that Jonathan's role within Daystar was becoming less important. His input on major decisions was being ignored, and his vision for the future of the network was being overshadowed by his mother's. The strain between them was clear, and it was having a significant impact on the organization. The power struggle within Daystar was no longer just about business decisions. It was about control, loyalty, and the future of the network itself. As Joni's leadership became more centralized, the atmosphere within Daystar grew tense. Staff members who had once been close to Joni and her family began to feel alienated. They were no longer part of the decision-making process and were left in the dark about the direction the network was heading. The collaborative spirit that had once defined Daystar was replaced by a more isolated leadership style, with Joni at the helm, surrounded by a small circle of people who shared her vision. The rest of the staff, many of whom had been there from the beginning, felt like they had been pushed to the margins. The growing sense of frustration was not limited to the staff. It was also felt by many of the volunteers who had dedicated their time and energy to the network. Daystar had once been a place where everyone had a voice, but now it felt like the opinions of the people who had helped build it no longer mattered. The shift in leadership was causing a divide between those who supported Joni's new approach and those who felt that the values that had made Daystar great were being compromised. The personal life of Joni, particularly her remarriage, only added to the tension. The timing of the relationship, coming so soon after Marcus' death, left many questioning whether Joni was truly ready for such a big decision. Some saw her quick move toward marriage as a sign of strength, a way for Joni to move forward with her life. But others saw it as a sign of instability, a decision made too quickly and without the proper emotional healing. The new relationship was now intertwined with the leadership of Daystar, with Doug becoming more involved in the network, raising questions about his role and influence. The tension inside Daystar was reaching a breaking point, and it was clear that something had to give. As the power struggle within the family and the network continued to grow, the future of Daystar became uncertain. Joni's leadership, once seen as a symbol of strength and unity, was now a source of division and controversy. The network, once a beacon of hope and faith, was now embroiled in a battle for control, with loyalties divided and the future of Daystar hanging in the balance. Joyce Meyer's public criticism of Joni Lamb was a moment that no one in the Christian media world saw coming, and its impact was nothing short of devastating. The two women had been close friends and allies for many years, both sharing a deep commitment to spreading the gospel through their respective ministries. Together, they had built careers based on faith, service, and the belief in the power of their shared values. Their friendship had weathered personal and professional storms, and for many, it seemed unbreakable. But when Joyce Meyer spoke out against Joni's leadership, everything changed, and the consequences were immediate and far-reaching. For years, Joyce Meyer had been one of Joni's biggest supporters, offering guidance and wisdom as Joni navigated the ups and downs of leading Daystar. They had worked together on various projects, both in the ministry and outside of it, and had shared many personal moments. Joyce had been there through some of Joni's most challenging times, including the death of her husband, Marcus Lamb. The bond between the two women had seemed strong, built on mutual respect and a shared commitment to their faith. But as Joni's leadership at Daystar became more centralized, and her personal life began to take center stage, tension started to simmer under the surface. It started with small, subtle shifts in their relationship. Joyce, who had always been known for her transparency, began to notice a change in Joni. She saw a shift in Joni's leadership style, one that became less collaborative and more authoritarian. As Joni took more control over Daystar, many people within the organization started to feel alienated, including Joyce. The ministry, which had once been a place where voices were heard and decisions were made collectively, began to feel more like a dictatorship. Those who had been with Daystar since its early days, including Joyce, started to feel that their input didn't matter anymore. Joni, once seen as a warm, collaborative leader, now seemed more interested in consolidating power and controlling the direction of the network. Joyce, who had always been a direct person, couldn't ignore the changes she saw in Joni. She had always admired Joni's leadership and dedication, but as the years passed, she became increasingly concerned. Joyce had tried to approach Joni privately, hoping to address her concerns about the direction of Daystar and the changes in Joni's leadership style. But those attempts were met with resistance. Joni, it seemed, was no longer willing to listen. She was focused on her own vision for the network, and those who disagreed with her were pushed aside. Joyce's concerns went unaddressed, and the divide between the two women grew. The tipping point came when Joyce Meyer publicly criticized Joni's leadership. It wasn't a quiet comment made behind closed doors. It was a full-blown public statement about Joni's shifting priorities and leadership style. Joyce was blunt and direct, expressing her concerns about the direction Daystar was headed. She accused Joni of prioritizing her personal ambition over the values that had once made Daystar a beacon of hope and faith. Joyce was deeply worried that Joni's focus on consolidating power was compromising the ministry's original mission. In Joyce's view, Daystar was supposed to be about faith, family, and service, not about one person's desire for control. For Joni, this public criticism was a devastating blow. Joyce had been one of her closest friends, someone she had relied on for support and guidance. To have Joyce publicly accuse her of losing her way, of being consumed by power and ambition, was a shock to her system. Joni had built her career and reputation on her leadership at Daystar, and now, here was someone she trusted and admired calling that leadership into question. Joyce's words struck at the heart of everything Joni had worked for, and the fallout was immediate. The public nature of Joyce's criticism only made things worse. What had been a personal disagreement between friends was now a public spectacle, with fans and followers on both sides of the issue taking to social media to voice their opinions. Some rallied behind Joni, defending her as a strong and dedicated leader who was simply doing what was necessary to keep Daystar afloat. Others sided with Joyce, believing that Joni had lost sight of the values that had made Daystar great. The division between the two women's supporters was stark, and the debate raged on for weeks. As the fallout continued to unfold, it became clear that this was more than just a personal conflict. The criticism of Joni's leadership exposed deeper issues within Daystar. The once close-knit family ministry was now fractured, with tensions rising between Joni and those who had been part of the network from the beginning. Joni's decision to centralize power and focus on her own vision for Daystar had alienated many, and now, with Joyce's public comments, the cracks in the foundation of the network were fully exposed.